Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kelly Gillespie. I'm with the Missouri Biotechnology Association, hi Dennis. And with me today is Lisa Zimmerman with MOBIO and at our Columbia campus. I'm at our Jefferson City, Maine World Headquarters campus, but we are really grateful for having strong participation in this. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Medical Public Policy and MOBIO Executive Committee Member Extraordinaire, Dr. Robert Blaine, and ask Dr. Blaine to introduce our guest today. You gotta unmute, Doctor.
Gotta unmute. Sorry, I knew I was gonna do that. Thanks, Kelly. And of course, I have to start by saying I'm not a doctor. I like to joke that I've worked for Washington University for 16 years, so I'm practically a doctor, but I'm not a doctor, but am thrilled every day to get to work with the physicians and scientists at the university who are doing incredible things, and we're going to hear one of those incredible stories today. You know, when you think about the name Washington University, you might think of the Gothic Hilltop campus, or maybe our Washington University physicians, our medical practice. Maybe you've heard about one of our research accomplishments, such as our role with the Human Genome Project. But what gets me excited and what I talk about these days when I'm talking to my friends and family about WashU is the fact that, right here in St. Louis, right here in Missouri, we have an absolute powerhouse of researchers and physicians that work in the neurosciences, which is why it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you today to one of our newest leaders in those efforts, Dr. Linda Richards. Dr. Richards is an internationally recognized expert in brain development and developmental disorders. She was appointed chair of the Department of Neuroscience and the Edison Professor of Neuroscience at Washington University School of Medicine in January 2021. And prior to this appointment, she served as Professor of Neuroscience and is the Deputy Director of Research at the Queensland Brain Institute at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia. Dr. Richards investigates how the brain forms during development and how disruptions to normal development lead to brain disorders and brain cancer. Her lab investigates the formation of the corpus callosum, the bundle of nerves that connects the two hemispheres of the cerebral cortex, and which is affected in many intellectual disability syndromes. In particular, Dr. Richards studies how neurons from one brain hemisphere grow across the midline and find their target in the opposite hemisphere. And her research into a specific family of genes that controls the development of support cells in the brain, known as glial cells, has provided insights into how processes that regulate brain development may be disrupted in brain cancer. Throughout her career, Dr. Richards has also made important contributions to increasing public awareness of science and engaging the community in the importance of science. In 2006, she founded the Australian Brain Bee Challenge, a national branch of an international competition for high school students that's designed to inspire young people to learn about the brain, neurological diseases, and mental illness, and to pursue careers in neuroscience, a program that has engaged 30,000 Australian high school students. And in 2015, she co-founded the International Consortium for Corpus Callosum and Cerebral Connectivity. Dr. Richards earned her bachelor's degree at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and her Bachelor of Science with honors and a doctoral degree at the University of Melbourne before moving to San Diego for a postdoctoral position at the Salk Institute. She took her first faculty position at the University of Maryland, moved back to Australia in 2005 to take up her position at the Queensland Brain Institute. And we at Washington University were thrilled when she agreed last year to move back to the United States to take the helm of the Department of Neuroscience and to contribute and to coordinate our efforts to pursue groundbreaking discovery in brain science, support outstanding clinical care that we provide to patients with neurodegeneration and other brain disorders, and to continue our tradition of training the next generation of brain scientists. So Dr. Richards, thank you for being here today, and I will turn the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Robert. I would just like to start by sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see that okay.
Yes.
So firstly, thank you very much, Robert and MOBIO, for inviting me to talk to you today. It's really exciting and a great pleasure to be here. I thought that I would take you through a little bit about WashU Neuroscience across the campus and some of our fantastic breakthroughs that I've been learning about since I joined WashU, and then talk a little bit about where we're going with neuroscience globally and what you can expect to be seeing coming from our department. So just to set the stage, what you're seeing here is an MRI derived image. It's called a tractography image from some high field MRI that we obtained from a living human brain of a person in a 7 Tesla scanner. And you can see the incredible exquisite detail of all the connections that are present throughout the brain that are joining different parts of the brain. And we're very interested in how these connections form during development and how they underpin function. So firstly, let me just set the scene by showing you this and just reminding you how incredible your brain really is, and pointing out that every person's brain is unique. It is unique in not only how the connections, all the different connections are formed, but also in all of the different incredible functions that your brain can do, really seemingly without any effort. And this amazing array of different functions that the brain has is something that our department and WashU Neuroscience overall is really looking to understand those fundamental processes in how the brain works. So when you think of the brain, you may be thinking of the brain as being something like this, maybe a desktop machine. Maybe you're even thinking of a supercomputer like this. Well, computers really can learn very quickly. They can take in enormous amounts of information. And really, artificial intelligence has now beaten the best human players at Atari games and using a form of machine learning called deep learning, which is based on neuroscience and how the brain actually processes information. We can apply what we know about the brain to neural networks and to developing these artificial neural networks. But where computers are limited is in solving basic novel problems with reasoning. And we take many of these functions for granted that our brain can do. And so although we have incredible computational power in the world right now, we still can't do what the brain is able to do in each one of us, this effortless, flexible thinking that we're able to do. And this ability to take in different types of information and integrate that into a plausible narrative about the world around us. Our ability to express empathy, being able to make other people feel good when we talk to them, and taking care of others, being artistic and creative, expressing emotions and being vulnerable in a relatable way. Computers can't do any of these things. And it's really up to our scientists to try and figure out how the brain is able to do all of these functions. So something that is very exciting, though, is this field of brain-computer interfaces that is happening at WashU. And I've got a couple of images here. Hopefully you've heard previously from Dr. Eric Luthart in this group. He's a neurosurgeon that has developed a company called Neuroscience with his colleagues. and has recently been developing this IPSY hand upper extremity rehabilitation system to help people recovering from stroke. And what you can see here is a cap where this device is recording brain activity. Literally, you can train the person to think about how they want to move their hand, and that information can be relayed to this prosthetic hand, which will help the person move the paralyzed limb. So this is just some of the really exciting work that's going on at WashU at the moment in the area of neurotechnologies. And I understand that Eric is moving his group into Cortex soon, and that there'll be an expansion of this type of technology happening within Cortex. Brains are also very vulnerable, as you would know. Here I have just given you some facts about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, and you can see that this devastating group of disorders, the dementias and Alzheimer's disease, have increased over 145% between 2000 and 2019. They're currently costing the US $355 billion in 2021, and this will increase to over 1.1 trillion by 2050. So at WashU, we are working hard, my colleagues here are working very hard to try and address the causes of Alzheimer's disease and to come up with new treatments and cures for this disease. Fundamentally, we need to understand what is the cause of Alzheimer's disease, though, as well. You may or may not know that WashU is the top NIH-funded institution for Alzheimer's disease and dementia research, and this is principally headed by David Holtzman, who just stepped down as being the chair of neurology, who's one of the most famous Alzheimer's disease researchers in the world. And together with Randy Bateman, David has developed this diagnostic test through CTN Diagnostics, which is a blood test for Alzheimer's disease, and has just come into to effect. It's been through clinical trials and is now available. This is an incredible advance that has been contributed by David and his colleagues. Also at WashU is the clinical dementia rating scale. So these are ways of measuring the advance of clinical dementia. These are so important for developing new drugs and treatments, so that you have a way of measuring either with the blood test or with this clinical dementia rating scale, so that as you're providing an intervention, you can measure outcomes from that. So it's really exciting to be part of this clinical translation world that is happening at WashU. So in addition to Alzheimer's disease, we are also facing a huge burden of disease, both now and coming in the future, in terms of mental illness. So here again, some statistics for you. 1 in 20 US adults experience a serious mental illness. And you can imagine that COVID has really had an impact here in increasing issues with mental illness. And what we find with both neurological disease and mental illness, this really disproportionately affects the quality of life for people. We often think about heart disease or diseases of other organ systems like the lungs or the kidney, where you may die from the disease. Neurological and disease and mental illness really disproportionately affect this aspect of quality of life. So people live with these diseases for a very long time. And so it's important that we try to look for ways of improving their quality of life. Now at WashU, we have some therapeutics for treating depression that are currently in clinical trials at WashU. through Sage Therapeutics. And I also wanted to mention some basic research in this field that's being done in our department by Professor Adam Kepes here, who is working on the neurological basis of psychosis and hallucinations, and had a very nice paper this year in Science, where he's developed an animal model for understanding mechanisms for screening compounds. He can actually measure hallucinations in an animal model. And this is really going to have an impact on our ability to look at the underlying circuitry that's being disrupted in psychosis and hallucinations. We really need these kinds of advances to be able to understand what's going on in mental illness. So within our department, and I have included just a couple of our faculty here so that you can see that these are real people, there are groups working on the neural processes underlying brain function, how the brain processes, stores and computes information, how our genes and environment influence the brain, and what is the function of sleep, and how does this circadian rhythms of our body, how is that encoded within our brains? So members of our department are really focused on trying to understand how the brain works from a very fundamental level, providing the essential pipeline of discoveries that go through into translation within the clinical departments at WashU. As Robert mentioned, my own research is focused on early brain development and how processes in early brain development are important for wiring the brain, and then how the wiring of the brain underpins cognitive function. And we're really focused on this question of how brain structure relates to brain function. Now, also something I wanted to mention about our department is that we are the home of the Human Brain Connectome project that has been headed up by Professor David Van Essen, who has been at WashU for many years. And if you don't know about the Human Brain Connectome, this is a series of different programs specifically targeted to map all the connections within the brain. This initially started with the adult human brain, but now the groups have, and both here and around the world who are participating in this through MRI scanning, have moved on to the lifespan connectome data, where they're scanning across aging, people who are aging, across development in children, and even in babies. And so we're getting a really good picture of the human brain across different time points in a person's life. In addition, this Connectome project also has different cohorts of people with different diseases. So now we have a great way of looking at how brain connections might be different in people with different mental illnesses or neurological disease. And we have these normative data sets that we can then compare them with. Now, just to talk a little bit more about WashU Neuroscience, and maybe why did I want to move here and be part of this amazing place. WashU Neuroscience is really special in that it's big. There are literally hundreds of neuroscience labs at WashU spread across different departments. And this gives us the ability to tackle the biggest questions. We have the capacity, we have the critical mass, and we have the breadth of expertise here to really move the dial on understanding how the brain works. WashU also has a depth and tradition of neuroscientific excellence that's really unparalleled. We also have the clinical expertise here that's really deeply embedded with basic science. And this makes translation possible. So if we have discoveries that we're producing in the basic science departments that are fundamental to really just understanding how the brain works, we can take these into translation very quickly because of the fantastic integrated collaboration with the clinical departments at WashU. There's also a really fantastic collaborative interdisciplinary environment with the Danforth campus as well, across the departments of engineering, maths, physics, and the School of Arts and Sciences, as well as the psychological and behavioral sciences groups. Right. And let me tell you about the new building. This is so exciting. We are building the largest neuroscience research building in the US. This neuroscience research building will be 10 stories high. Already we have 100 labs that are moving in the middle of 2023. And this will grow to about 145 labs. And this is going to provide us with just an incredible workspace. Another fantastic thing, so here you can see the building is under construction right now, and this is the rendering of what it will look like in 2023. They are absolutely on track to deliver that building on time. And what's exciting about it is that this building is right smack on the edge of the Cortex precinct, in between the hospitals and Cortex. And this is the perfect position really for us to play an essential role between clinical translation, but also translation with collaborations with industry that we hope will build within the Cortex Innovation Precinct. You may also know that the global investment in neurotechnology is estimated to result in a market of, in 2025, worth US 53 billion. So this is some information from the Neuro-Insights report in 2017. So it's already a bit out of date, but just shows you the massive rise in both neurodiagnostics, neurodevices, and we have included here the launch of the US Brain Initiative. And if there's time at the end, we could talk a little bit about this. This was an initiative that was started in 2014 by the federal government of the US to understand the brain. And there's been a huge amount of advances in this time due to this increase in investment, with big economic payoffs that will accrue to communities that successfully nurture the neurotechnology industry. All right, so I just wanted to conclude with a couple of slides about opportunities to collaborate with commercial partners. And this is where I hope that we can have an ongoing and close collaboration with MOBIO. So we would like to participate in developing Cortex as a thriving neurotech hub. The opportunities are across a whole range of different areas: drug discovery, neurogenetic diagnostics, cognitive and behavioral assessment, diagnostics, modulation of brain activity. I'd like to come back to that one. Brain-machine interfaces, wearables, artificial intelligence, and big data science. What we can provide are, of course, our amazing new scientific discoveries and insights into brain function that can be applied to a whole range of different problems. We have expertise and interdisciplinary approaches, as I've said. We are developing an open access data model, and we can talk a little bit more about this and how it can reduce the need for companies to have their own commercial R&D. We have animal models, including non-human primates, bioassays, etc. We have expertise in human brain imaging, Connectome, across the also the clinical areas. And we really have outstanding research facilities that are world-class in genomics, proteomics, MRI, cellular imaging, etc. And as I mentioned before, we can do rapid clinical trials. So what are some of the opportunities that would be fantastic for our department? We would love to have partners that would help us develop new devices for recording and manipulating brain activity, both invasively and non-invasively. There's a whole field of light-guided brain activity manipulation through optogenetics. And translating these from animals into human application would be very exciting. Also, the implementation of neural computation methods to solve difficult problems in industry associated with machine learning, the development of new behavioural assays, and also techniques and sequences for high field MRI imaging. And we'd love to collaborate. And so I'll wrap it up there, Kelly, and would be very happy to discuss any of those points or take questions. Thank you.
Well, Linda, thank you very much for that presentation. That's truly exciting and opens up, boy, a vast world that you touch and have to keep track of and have to be innovative to drive. Do we have any questions coming from the audience? We're going to forego the tradition of me asking the dumbest question possible to let you all show off your science skills. Anybody want to jump in? You need to unmute, or you'll have to chat me a question.
So Kelly, I have a question.
Yes, hi Dennis.
This is probably a little bit of a twist here for you, but you talked about your expertise coming in early childhood brain development, I think is where you start.
Yeah.
You mentioned that. So looking at crime prevention strategies, there are a lot of social crime prevention strategies that are being used internationally these days, and the whole approach there is what environmental impacts there are that contribute to social, to criminal behavior. And I'm thinking this question comes from the perspective of early childhood development in neighborhoods and environments that are underrepresented and poverty situations. Do you have any sense of if there's permanent kind of brain development issues there, that poverty, poor health, low educational performance contributes that there's to brain development that relates to crime itself? Is there any literature that you're aware of on that, or?
Okay, so I'm not an expert on crime, but it's certainly the case that the development of the brain at critical points is very much influenced by environment. So that would be all aspects of the environment. That would be the social aspects of the environment, the care and love that the child is receiving from their parents, the stress within the environment, the nutritional components, the education components that they might receive as well, and a safe environment to grow up in. So these are, after the child's born, but even before the child's born, there are, influences. For example, I'm thinking of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. This is a major problem in Australia. Drug use, things like that definitely impact brain development. So, it's those things that do impact brain development. Is it reversible? I think maybe you were also asking, or what can be done about that. What I can tell you is that the brain is amazingly plastic, incredibly plastic. So there are certainly interventions that can be done to improve the quality of life for people who have had that kind of disruption during development.
Thank you.
How that's associated with crime, I think those are aspects that people are working on at the Brown School at WashU, and we're interested in all aspects of brain and outcome for people, and would be very happy to be involved in collaborations regarding that, just in my own research. Yeah.
Dennis, you eloquently stole my thunder. That I was going to focus on early childhood brain development of, how to electronics like tablets for toddlers as babysitters, or the various social media hitting preteens and constantly distracting them and having them jump from topic to topic and subject to subject. How does that, are we seeing data yet that informs us as parents or grandparents what we should be doing or not doing?
It's interesting because there was sort of this idea that video games were bad, and kids would be better outside playing. Well, certainly from a physical perspective, they'd be better outside doing physical activity. But there is data that shows that, in fact, there is cognitive stimulation from playing video games. It obviously depends on the type of video games that people are playing, and but if you're playing video games that put you under stress, under a lot of stress, obviously that might not be such a great thing. But the brain wants to be stimulated. So any kind of stimulation is what it's really looking for. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you for explaining.
Kelly, you've got a raised hand from Barbara Lips.
Yeah, Barbara.
Hi. Fascinating research, and I was interested in your collaboration with the clinical aspect of it. It's one of the things that was of interest to me was, and you mentioned it also with the childhood development, is the research that's been going on to discover the addictive aspects of behavior and the biochemistry behind that. Can you touch a little bit on how you're going to look into that?
So I don't work on that specifically myself, but there is a center at WashU for intellectual and developmental disorders research that's headed up by Professor John Constantino and Chris Gurnett, who is in neurology, and John is in psychiatry. So they have an NIH center that is very cross-disciplinary. There are 13 of these centers across the US that are NIH funded. And there are different programs across autism and other developmental disorders, including intellectual disability. And there are researchers across the group that are looking at social disadvantage. So Joan Luby has done some studies in that area, and Deanna Barch as well. So there are groups at WashU that are studying this. Now, one thing that's really exciting about it's called the IDDRC, the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Research Center, is that they have core facilities within the center that allow for translation. So, so basic researchers like myself don't have to reinvent the wheel to recruit participants into our research. They're recruited in through some of the clinical departments, for example. And when we're talking about developmental disorders, we're often talking about genetic disruptions that cause those disorders. Sometimes it's environmental, could be alcohol, drug related. But in addition to that, many of these disorders are caused by genetic disruptions. And within the IDDRC, they have cores which are able to take some of those genes and make these mutations in cell lines, which we can then study to look at how that mutation might affect the development of neurons in a dish to provide a model system in which we could try and understand the function of those genes. And then also that can be used for drug screening as well to mitigate issues such as epilepsy or you know, other disruptions. I'm not sure if that answers your question though, Barbara.
Yeah, Dr. Richards, again, thank you for the presentation. I just thought I'd just jump in. You talked a lot about, you know, the computational models that underlies a lot of this work, or that has come out of the field of neurosciences, and the interest in potentially partnering, particularly with organizations, you know, outside of even the immediate human health area. And I'm just curious, are there particular applications or opportunities that kind of, you know, transcend those fields that are on your mind as being, you know, ripe for those sort of collaborations?
So there are so many areas in which we can apply machine learning in industry. And I think a lot of industries are really looking at how they can utilize these newer computational techniques. But image analysis is just one of those. And so, you know, it would be fantastic to have some companies within Cortex that might be interested in developing machine learning approaches. And really, there are companies that provide an interface between the basic research and other companies, you know, that act as a kind of third party. So I'd be very interested in meeting anybody that was, you know, interested in that, or is thinking of developing something in that area. But I mean, you could think of many different applications for this and across a whole variety of different industries, from manufacturing to agriculture to maybe even Boeing. I'm sure that they have people working in this area.
I imagined a tremendous number of research institutions would give their right arm to have a Dr. Linda Richards look their way and decide to consider them. What were some really important factors that prioritized you considering St. Louis, considering Washington University for this point in your career? Because landing you is one of the big success stories for Missouri Biosciences. I can tell that's a big achievement for the whole ecosystem. So welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. It's very kind of you. So I have represented Australia at the international levels in neuroscience. I've been president of the Australasian Neuroscience Society, co-chair of the Australian Brain Alliance, and a founding member of the International Brain Initiative. I had kind of reached where I could go in the small environment within Australia, and having grown up scientifically within the US system, I felt very comfortable coming back to the US. But why WashU? I was really excited to be approached by WashU for this position. because of the incredible, I mean, I already knew about the reputation, but as I looked deeper at what was available here and the very unique things that we have here that are not present on the coasts, having lived on both coasts, I can tell you that Washu has a really unique collaborative environment. So many places have a very competitive environment in which groups are kind of pitted against one another that work next to each other. Washu is the complete opposite of that. There is an incredible collaborative environment where people are really interested in the science and not the politics of science, if you like. And this deep integration between the basic science departments and the clinical departments it's also quite unique. You know, the MD PhD program here is probably one of the best in the country. And that is because of this emphasis on being able to make progress through really understanding the fundamental mechanisms. And that's pretty unique. Now, St. Louis is also a great place to come. My partner and I love jazz and blues, and this is a fantastic place for music. And there's, so we've been having a great time since we've been here, exploring all that St. Louis has to offer.
I hope someone is taking you to Ted Drew's.
Okay. Well, I think we're going there on Friday, actually.
Okay. Yeah. That's usually our best recruiting tool.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today for this MOBIO breakthrough. You're always welcome to come back and speak on a more specific topic. We loved having you today, and we appreciate everyone's participation. We'll be back. Stay tuned. In October, I believe the MOBIO breakthrough is going to shift over to St. Louis Community College and their biotechnology certificate program, which is also super important for the development that's going on out there at 39 North, the Danforth Plant Science Center, and how we're helping startup companies with good young workforce talent. So thank you everyone for joining.